Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Our project for today is making rebar stirrups and hooks that are going to go in the walls when we start putting them up. The stirrups are going to be used to put together the rebar cages that go in the poured concrete columns in the walls, and those columns are then used to support the I-beam that spans the living room and the kitchen, and then the floor joists rest on that to support the second floor. And what I'm doing is using a kind of industry formula for figuring out cut length and stick out for the bending schedule, how much of the rebar you stick out past the center point on your whatever your bending tool is. And the thing you got to bear in mind is that most of these things you find are going to be set for specific tools. So you're going to have to, if you do this, make some adjustments. This morning I kind of took my measurements and made up some test pieces to figure out where I was going to have to adjust. But the way that you normally do this, and I'll put these formulas up on the screen so y'all can see them. To find your length, you take the overall perimeter of the rectangle that you're trying to make and add your hook length and then subtract your bend length. The stirrups that we're trying to bend are going inside an 11 by 16 column, and we want 1.5 inches of concrete cover over the whole thing. So that means you're going to take 3 inches off of the width in both directions, and what that ends up doing is gives you the length. So the way that you start calculating your length, part of it's going to be based on the diameter of whatever bar you're bending. So for example, the hooks that go on the end that wrap around one of the bars are 9 times the diameter of whatever rebar you're working with. So if we take 18 times the diameter, we're working with number 3 rebar. So we end up with 18 times 0.375, because it's 3/8 of an inch, equals 6.75 inches. So each of your hooks should be roughly 3 3/8 of an inch long. You take that and then you add it to your end lengths and your side lengths of your rectangle based on how much coverage you want. So if we start with an 11-inch wide column that we're putting the rebar in, we want 3 inches of coverage, we'll end up with an 8-inch leg. So that'll be times 2. So we've got 6 3/4 plus 16. Then we've got a 16-inch side. We subtract 3 inches from that. That gives us 13 inches times 2, which gives us 26 inches. And according to these formulas, we should end up with an overall cut length of 44 inches, or 44 1/4 inches. But here's the problem. Depending upon the diameter of the center point or the pivot point of whatever you're using to bend this rebar, that length is going to change. And because the bender I'm using is just a universal bender, it is not rebar specific, it's got 1.5 inch diameter center pivot. So I end up actually needing about a 48-inch length to get the size rectangles that I need. And when it's time to determine how much of your rebar needs to stick out to give you your correct leg length and your hook length that you want at the end, you've got to use the diameter of that bar and the diameter of your center pivot. So for example, if we want a 4.5 inch hook, we end up with taking the diameter of the bar, which is 0.375 times 2 plus the radius of your center pivot, or the diameter divided by 2. So you end up with a 3-inch stick out, because as you're coming around with the bar, it's going to roll the long end of the bar, or the running end of the bar, around that radius. And so you're going to have a different starting length stick out than what you actually want the leg to end up being. So for example, on the 8-inch side, we need roughly a 6 3/4 inch stick out. And then for the 13-inch side, we need roughly an 11.5 inch stick out. And you've got to kind of make some test pieces and play with this stuff to figure out what exactly is going to work. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the rebar, because I've determined my overall length that I need, and then we're going to go start bending, and I'll show you how I made up a couple little jigs to make this go a little faster, because I've got to make 64 of these for the 3 columns. I'm going to be using a different tool to make these cuts today, because I really didn't want to listen to the dang hot saw or quickie saw. It's a Porter Cable Portaband or portable band saw. Milwaukee makes them. DeWalt makes, most of the tool manufacturers make them. This is just a really old one that we've had for a long time. And I'm going to see if this makes this work any better. I think it might need a new blade. So the way you change the blade on these, this handle there's a shoe that this wheel rides on with a set of springs that hold tension, and it just cams over. And you just loosen it off and then work your blade out, which is usually easier said than done. Unless you don't want it to fall off, and in which case it will. Come on off of there. You got to kind of work it off. There we go. And since I just put new drive tires or rubber on this thing, it should be interesting getting this new non-stretched blade on. And you want to make sure that it's going the right way. Sometimes they'll be flipped inside out. So you got the little teeth on there. It cuts one direction. You want to make sure that the points of your teeth are facing toward your stop on the saw. If you put it on the fixed wheel first and then work it around the wheel that without knocking the tire off. Kind of like putting a bicycle chain back on. And of course it's come off the other end. Once you get it over the tires, if you tighten it up, it should self-center on the rubber. Okay, let's try this again. Well, that's a lot quieter, and it's a lot less prone to set my pants on fire. All right, this bender is just a cheap old Harbor Freight bender that we've been using for quite a while. And what we use it for is a lot of times bending up 1/2-inch square tubing for making door frames for toolboxes or repair on antique cars is what my dad uses it for. I've used it to make ornamental stuff and you know, just different welding projects. And these are some dies that were shop made, and these are set up to keep you from kinking the 1/2-inch square tubing, because if you try to just use these flat roller dies, it'll kink it. Whereas with this, because it's contained inside these top and bottom, it keeps it from swelling out the side and kinking. It keeps everything lined up. Not what we're doing today, but just to give you an idea. From doing the test pieces, I was able to figure out a sight line for my hook, which is the inside edge of this ring. And then there's the two separate lengths. You've got an 8-inch leg and a 13-inch leg. And so you've got to determine your stick out. So I made these just quick stops up out of a couple of pieces of welding rod. And to do the 8-inch leg, once you get the hook on it, you come out and stop here. And then to do the 13-inch leg, this is your stop. And you'll see how it works. And the reason this is painted orange is because there's 3 different sides, or 4 different sides on this square piece, and it's for different thicknesses of material. And if you use the wrong one, it'll change your bend point, which will throw your measurements off. So I painted it orange just as a quick reference. And to show you what we're making, we're making these stirrups. And the way they're going to work, because we're making a rectangular column that goes in the wall, there'll be vertical rebar in these corners and then on the sides that this gets tied to, and it holds it all together in a cage. You've probably seen them, you know, on job sites or TV or whatever. And one of the columns we're building is going to be L-shaped because there's 2 beams that hang off of it. So these will fit together like this around the vertical rebar. I don't know if y'all can see it. They'll fit together in an L shape like this. So I've got to make 64 of these things, and hopefully it's going to go well. Because this number 3 rebar, because of, like everything else, prices have gone up on steel. This stuff's $6 and something a stick from my steel supplier. And I may have to reposition the camera. We'll see. Oh, gonna have to move y'all. Maybe have to move you again. Yep. So that's the hook. And then we bring it back, catch it here. And this needs to be a 90-degree bend, so you've actually got to go a little past 90 to get it to stay. And that's the 13 side. And then we do another 8. And because this universal bender is designed more to bend flat stock, the ribs on this rebar has a tendency to hang. This last part's kind of interesting because you've got to work around the piece you've already bent up. And then once you get everything lined up and on the angle iron, the angles are a little off, but it's soft enough you can bend it by hand once you get your form started. And it just goes around like that. See, you can make adjustments to it by hand. Now when I start making the hooks out of the number 5 rebar that go over the window and door openings, those are a little harder to bend by hand. And if you're doing a lot of rebar, a lot of folks have built up a bending table, and it's got movable stops and everything. It's set up specifically for doing this. And since I don't have a whole bunch to make, I didn't see any point in See? And if we were doing this a lot of production, like I say, we'd even using a table and put all of the bends so that we could just lay the rod on the table and hit a different stop and just go down the table and bend them all. That might have been the best one yet. Because the bender that I was using to bend that number 3 rebar is not stout enough to bend this number 5 or 5/8 bar, I ended up having to make a bending jig and a bender. Part of the problem is because of where we live, I can't get stuff easily. I've got to order it and wait on it to show up. So I just took another big piece of rebar. I think this is number 8 or maybe number 9, and welded a couple of pieces of number 5 on there for jaws to grab this stuff and bend it around the jig that I set up here. What I'm making are hooks, and they go inside that block and hang on the rebar that is in a cell above, and then over all of the window and door openings there's 2 number 5 rebars that hang in the center of that cell in these hooks. I've got to make about 120 of these things because they go every foot in a window or door opening. So you've got, you know, one on each end that's past the opening, and then one every 12 inches inside the opening. So I got to bend about 120 of these things. It's not fun. I kind of wish I had a rebar bending machine. But the process is pretty easy. It's just labor intensive. It is not nearly as easy to build as that number 3 was. That's the process. What I'm working on here, I'm trying to finish up the last of the rebar that is not full sticks, or the cut pieces that are going to go in the top of the slab down into the stem wall and connect into the block walls. What I'm making are little nails, for lack of a better term, that will go through the block and keep the horizontal rebar centered inside the cells in the block. And the reason I'm making these things is, one, I have a whole bunch of number 3 rebar, and two, if you go and buy these 8-inch nails, they're $1 a piece. So it's probably going to end up all together taking me about 4 hours to make it. I'm going to spend about $60 worth of, well, about $72 worth of material. So that means that I'm going to be making somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 an hour to do this. Not really, but I'm saving about 400 bucks by doing this. So I'm going to try to finish cutting these, and then I'll show you the rest of the stuff that we were bending up the other day, so you can see just how much of it there was. All right, we ended up with, I think it was 500 and about 16 or 18 of those nails. And 122 of these number 5 standard hooks that'll go inside the block and hold up the rebar over the tops of the window and door openings. And there's 64 of these now I can't remember what they're called. Oh, stirrups that go on the columns. So a lot of work, but you know, save money, and there's no place close by that bends rebar anymore. All right, folks, I think that's going to wrap this video up for today. Thank you for watching, and y'all have a good day.